most this year with the CRE work that we did was just hearing about everybody's relationships, the relationships they created with kids, with each other. In our PD circles, people trusted each other. They shared a lot of great moments with each other, and I think that impacted me the most.
The idea that students didn't do their best work unless they had some sort of emotional connection to it.
I've always thought relationships are really important, but it was emphasized so much this year that I really focused more on it and paid attention to what individual students needed.
The gap between kids, just in their connection with teachers, but also their connection with the work that they're doing in the class. To me, that seems to be the biggest issue that education faces. And so I think that what we're doing with our work right now to create a community where kids feel needed, they feel wanted, they feel loved in their classroom is such a critical aspect to letting them be successful in the classroom. So.
Before I went and learned about how important it was to connect with students with a more personal assignment, I gave a research paper to my kids, which was kind of dry. They were supposed to pick a year that was the defining year in the American century, so that's the 20th century. They didn't connect with it a lot. It was very dry writing, and it wasn't very fun to grade. So after the PD, when I realized that that's what energized students, I decided to change it and focus more on them. What events impacted their lives as Americans, and how that helped define them as Americans. And as a result, I got way more interesting research papers and kids who wrote with a more natural flow. I had kids who were, whose parents survived Dunkirk, all sorts of different interesting facts I had no idea that were part of their lives, and neither did they. One student actually found out that his great-grandfather had written a diary in code from World War II. He was on a Navy battleship, and he learned how to decipher the code and read some of that primary source and put it into his papers.
Well, one of the things that I have really tried to do this year is connect daily with each one of my students of color, and just that specific intent has really helped grow my relationship with those kids individually, and therefore their love and their concern and their care for what's happening in my classroom has grown. And man, it made a huge difference. I couldn't believe it, and I wish I would have done it 27 years ago.
Their Eyes Were Watching God is a book that centers on a female character. Her name is Janie, and the book is really about Janie telling her story. In previous years, we have just focused on most of the literary elements of the book and kids analyzing theme and characters. This year, we really wanted to focus on the storytelling aspect of the book, and so we really wanted the students to be able to tell their own stories as part of their study of the book, because we felt like that would be more responsive and give the kids a chance to connect to the literature more.
One of the things we learned about is how French started dying in Louisiana, and it started with the Louisiana Constitution being changed in 1921, prohibiting the use of French, or of any language other than English, in public schools. And so students were punished physically and otherwise in schools for using French, even on the playgrounds. And so this caused caused the language to die. And so, but I was trying to figure out a way for my students to relate to that. And so we had this discussion in English about how they feel when they can't use their native language, and what emotions they feel, and what frustrations they feel. And it was really helpful for them to try to be able to understand something that for most of us as Americans we never experienced firsthand, which is having our native language stripped from us, and therefore a part of our identity. And oftentimes students who are bilingual and have a different culture at home than most of their peers, they will say that they, on some level, they don't feel like the exact same person, depending on which language they use. So that's fascinating for the other kids in the classroom as well.
I give kids, I have the dance project we do in our pre-calc and honors algebra 2, where you have a function, a mathematical equation, so like y equals x is just, it looks like this. And if you say y equals negative x, it looks like this. And y equals x squared looks like this. And so if you add things to that equation, it changes the movements. And kids get to group and they get to choose their music and they get to choose the groups that they work with in doing that, and they create a video. And they actually learn their math while they're doing that. So I had one student, the best story from this year was one student wasn't in a group, and so I was a little concerned, and I checked with her to say, hey, what group are you in? And she said, nope, I've got it covered. It's almost Thanksgiving. And I said, okay. And she said, I'm gonna have my family do this. And she did. On Thanksgiving Day, they got down into the basement. She taught them the dance moves, which were math equations. And the whole gang, they had, I think, 20 people. Kids, grandmas, aunts, uncles, fiancés, like 20 people in a basement doing her project. And it's great. It was great. It was hilarious.
I think because of the work that we've done this year, I've gotten to have more close relationships with students, more one-on-one conversations with them. I think they feel more comfortable to come in and talk with me, and I feel more comfortable having conversations with them that I might not have had in the past.
Well, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is that, first of all, students are there. And I don't mean just, actually I mean it in two ways. First of all, they're in class all the time. I have seen my consistent daily participation rise. I have seen kids that want to stay in the program that are auditioning for other classes at the end of the year. They want to keep singing, they want to keep doing performing arts, they want to keep being in the show. And over the past 2 or 3 years, when I've been really intentional, just our numbers of kids, students of color, have really gone up, and they're so much more involved. There's so much. They're leaders. They're leaders in the classroom, which just makes the class so much more fun to teach, and gives our entire class and our entire program an entirely different perspective. That's so fun to teach in.
And we actually had talked about how we wished we would have done this assignment earlier in the year, because they really sort of wrote about some things that were important that had happened in their lives, which was really great to read.
And we had one really startling difference. We had a student who had failed the class before and was retaking it, and who we just couldn't get him to write very much at all. And then when we had this assignment, he brought in his paper, and it was 5 pages of writing that he was really proud of and really excited about. And it was because we just gave him a chance to connect on a different level.
So I think the one result of making this small change in this one lesson has mostly just prompted me to try to think more intentionally and more frequently about other changes that I can make. And so one of my goals for next year, and this was sparked by my daughter, who works at the African Community Center with refugees. And so when she started that job, I thought, oh my gosh, what if, when we're studying about the deportation of the Acadians and the Acadian diaspora, if I could find someone to come into my classroom and give a first-hand account of what it's like to be forced from your homeland, someone to come in and make this part of history that we're studying about more real, and have them connected also to what's happening currently in their own, in their own community and in their own country. Because I think that none of us can really know what that is, and that could be so impactful for them to hear it firsthand.
I think in the whole process, even though it's math, we got to know each other better. dancing in front of other people in video, you know, that's vulnerable. And so they do that, and it makes a safe place so that when you're really confused about something down the road, you know, in this classroom you can say, hey, I still don't understand that, or I can ask this person a question. So it makes it safer, it builds relationships with me and my students, but also among the classmates.
Show you how to do it right, do it right, do it right.